Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghty of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. All of it brought to you by Casper Mattresses. Right now, get $50 off towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/lunch and using the promo code LUNCH at checkout. More on that in just a moment. Jim, we begin with our good martini, of course, and it's not often that a Democrat is in the good martini, and that we're very happy with that Democrat. It's not one that's actually in Washington, mind you. It's one that wants to be here. It's the Democrat running for U.S. Senate in Tennessee, Phil Bredesen. Champions himself as a moderate. He's up against Marsha Blackburn in the race to succeed Bob Corker. Of course, what we've seen over the past couple of days is that most Democrats currently serving in the U.S. Senate are demanding an FBI investigation of the Christine Ford allegation against Brett Kavanaugh. You got Kirsten Gillibrand calling it a sham if Grassley moves forward without letting the investigation happen and so forth. Phil Bredesen having none of that. The AP reports on this and quotes him as saying she has put herself out there. If she decided at this point to not do something, I guess the committee has to go ahead and say, well, we were willing to listen, but if she's not willing to talk, we need to go forward. The Senate race in Tennessee, a reliably Republican state, is among the most competitive in the nation. Bredesen, the state's former governor, is running as a centrist against Republican U.S. Congressman Marsha Blackburn and keeping a distance from National Democrats. So, Jim, it's not necessarily great for our hopes of seeing Blackburn win this race to give Phil Bredesen a pat on the back, but given the histrionics we're seeing from some folks in Washington, he deserves it.
Yeah. Before we go any further, I should point out I was talking with a Republican consultant earlier this week before Bredesen made his comments, and I said, hey, what are you thinking about Tennessee? And he says, I'm a little nervous. People down there who are not partisan Democrats generally like the former governor. He's running very much on this I'm not like those other Democrats in Washington theme, and this is the sort of thing that will reaffirm that. He really is breaking with the rest of the party, but I think it also says something that he is doing this. I figured the accusation would be sufficient to give the Joe Donnellys, Joe Manchins, and Heidi Heitkamps of the world a fig leaf to say, well, look, I can't vote for a nominee who's got this kind of allegation hanging over them, blah, 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 and back away from it. And here's Bredesen saying that even though I find her credible, look, if you have an allegation like this, you kind of need to testify. Otherwise, it's kind of fair for everybody to kind of dismiss it. As I wrote in today's Morning Jolt, it's kind of natural that people are going to look at things a little more skeptically if you're willing to make a really high-stakes, serious accusation in an interview with the media, but you won't do it under oath under penalty of perjury. People are going to draw conclusions from that fairly or unfairly. So Bredesen is basically the canary in the coal mine to Democrats, that this is an argument that is not going to play outside the Beltway. I think most people believe that, the justice system has this circumstance in which you can confront your accuser for a reason, and that the idea, very curious about what Ms. Ford kind of thought was going to happen here, that she could write the letter and that somehow Congress would act upon it and prevent Kavanaugh from becoming a Supreme Court justice, but that she herself would never have to testify. Also in today's Jolt, I lay out the oddity that on Monday, her lawyers said she was willing to testify and eager to testify. And in fact, the word was willing to do whatever it takes to inform the committee. Now, all of a sudden, she isn't. And I think the fact that Bredesen is effectively kind of abandoning ship on this argument of Democrats is a pretty key indicator for how it's playing in the rest of the country.
Yeah, my gut reaction, if in fact she doesn't know if she wants to testify yet, is that perhaps a lot of folks thought by going on the record with the Washington Post and then having the attorney make the rounds on Monday that the White House would get spooked and pull the nomination, or Kavanaugh himself would, or something. And that didn't happen. Now they have to figure out what Plan B is. But I don't know. I did see, though, Jim, that Claire McCaskill, I'm sure you're shocked by this, has decided that completely apart from the allegations, she's just decided that Brett Kavanaugh cannot get her vote for the Supreme Court. I'm sure your jaw's on the floor for that.
We already had a slew of Senate Democrats say that they opposed Kavanaugh's nomination. In some cases, the night he was named. This was not exactly a full of suspense decision. And you saw the likes of Blumenthal saying that he refused to meet with Kavanaugh, even though he'd already announced that he'd be voting against him. So I don't really understand why it would really matter that you're not willing to meet with somebody when you've already decided that. My best explanation for that, Greg, is there's flashbacks from NAM.
Not for Dick Blumenthal. Not for Dick Blumenthal.
The senators are going to vote the way they're going to vote. At this point, there's very little incentive for any but the most red state Democrat to vote for Kavanaugh, because otherwise you're going to have the Democrats screaming bloody, your Democratic grassroots screaming bloody murder at you right before re-election day. I figured this would be enough for them. It's also worth noting, Manchin's doing a little better than everybody expected. I think most people think Heidi Heitkamp is toast. Donnelly is still in a pretty competitive race, but those two might decide, you know what, vote your conscience or vote the way you want and let the chips fall where they may on election day. It may not be so decisive in the end in West Virginia and in North Dakota.
Exit question on this martini, Jim. By 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, we're going to know what her answer is, supposedly. Will she end up testifying on Monday? What's your guess?
This has been a big gamble by them. They really seem to think that if they keep on saying, we need an FBI investigation, that eventually Republicans would acquiesce to that, or that something else would happen. And I think most people are pointing out, one, it's not a federal crime that's been alleged to have occurred here. The Department of Justice has already said they have noted the allegation, added it to his background, but they have no intention of doing this. For interesting, not a single Democrat, at least that I've seen, has said we call on local police in Maryland to investigate. Really kind of interesting about what the thinking is here. If they're looking for reasons for her not to testify, which is certainly what this looks like over the last couple of days, Greg, then I think she's not going to testify. I think that for some reason, either she doesn't want to have her life completely disrupted by this, or, it's conceivable the people around her have doubts about how credible she will come across to the committee. Now, they've offered open hearing, closed hearing, behind closed doors. I assume we would get some sort of transcript or some sort of account of what she told the committee, but if she doesn't want to be in the middle of a media firestorm, that's possible. The only other thing, which is, again, people made it pretty obvious, she's scrubbed her social media. No one's found any, Facebook, Twitter, any of that kind of stuff. Greg, when's the last time you knew about a college professor who had one photo of her on the internet in its entirety?
That's pretty odd, but what does it tell us?
Yeah, it's not been. I mean, we have a professor who's highly regarded in her field. There's been testimony from her friends and colleagues. But there's not a single video of her addressing a class, not a single video of her at a conference. Really kind of interesting. And this doesn't say she's credible or not credible. I do note, though, that's really interesting that it seems that her social media and any presence of her on the internet, short of the basic page at the college she works at and past reference, short times she has been quoted in the local paper, are, to my knowledge, the only media footprint she's left over the last 30 some years, which is kind of interesting. And if you kind of wonder if for some reason she would not come across as a credible witness, maybe there was good reason they removed all that stuff. I don't know. We'll see. But my suspicion is that if she, it's always a possibility of an 11th hour shocking, she does decide to testify. But if they've been reluctant to do so this far, I'm not sure what will change in the next 24 hours to make her lawyers believe that testifying is a good idea.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. All right. Well, Claire McCaskill, I can promise everyone, lost no sleep trying to decide how to vote on this nomination. She just made her announcement later than most people in her party did. But if you want to make sure that you don't miss any sleep, Casper is the way to go. Casper is a sleep brand that makes expertly designed products to help you get your best rest one night at a time. The experts at Casper work tirelessly to make a quality sleep surface that cradles your natural geometry in all the right places. And the good news is your geometry gets taken care of and you still don't have to do any proofs. After all, you spend 1/3 of your life sleeping, so you should be comfortable. The original Casper mattress combines multiple supportive memory foams for a quality sleep surface with the right amounts of both sink and bounce.
The breathable design helps you sleep cool and regulates your body temperature throughout the night. Casper now offers 2 other mattresses, the Wave and the Essential. The Wave features a patent-pending premium support system to mirror the natural shape of your body, and the Essential has a streamlined design at a price that won't keep you up at night. All Casper products are designed, developed, and assembled in the United States. Prices are affordable because Casper cuts out the middleman and sells directly to you. Every Casper mattress is delivered right to your door in a small, how do they do that, size box. Plus, there's free shipping and hassle-free returns in the United States and Canada.
And if that's not enough, you can be sure of your purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free Sleep On It trial. And right now, 3 Martini Lunch listeners can get $50 towards select mattresses by visiting Casper.com/lunch and using the promo code lunch at checkout. That's Casper.com/lunch and use the promo code lunch for $50 off select mattresses. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini and more on the Kavanaugh versus Ford story. This is one of the items you have in today's edition of the Morning Jolt, and this is courtesy of the Washington Post. You write, Congresswoman Eshoo, and that's who Ford sent the letter to initially, and Eshoo's the one who passed it on to Feinstein. Eshoo describing Christine Blasey Ford to the Washington Post. She doesn't have a political bone in her body. And you write, this is a mildly surprising thing to hear about a Palo Alto University psychiatry professor who made small but repeated donations to the Democratic National Committee and Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, attended the Women's March, wore a pink-yarned brain hat at the March for Science, and signed a letter calling for the end of the policy of separating children from their parents at the border. Her partisan affiliation doesn't tell us one thing or another about whether her accusation is credible. So can we be honest about it? Can we just say she's a Democrat? She's got a political bone in her body. That doesn't mean she's lying. So, Jim, we also have at the same time Eric Swalwell, the California congressman who's on TV a lot, in mea culpa mode because he responded in quite ugly fashion to Susan Collins yesterday. The Hill had a story on Susan Collins getting, quote, pretty ugly voicemails and threats over the pressure she's getting on what to do about the Kavanaugh nomination. And Swalwell's initial tweet earlier this morning, boo-hoo-hoo, you're a senator who police will protect. A sexual assault victim can't sleep in her home tonight because of threats. Where are you sleeping? She's on her own while you and your Senate GOP colleagues try to rush her through a hearing. Later on, when perhaps he decided that tweeting at 3:24 a.m. was maybe not the best idea, he tweeted again, sexual assault victims deserve respect, and senators shouldn't be threatened by the public. I said something stupid and minimized ugly behavior. That tweet is deleted, and I'm sorry for that. So at least he saw the error of his ways there, and that's not always easy in politics, Jim. But some basic facts and acknowledgement of things would be helpful in this debate, including what we know about Dr. Ford, and realizing that harassment's not just going in one direction.
I suppose you could say Congresswoman Eshoo is correct in the biological sense. As far as I know, there is no bone in the body characterized the political bone, and therefore she does not have one. Look, she's, based on what we know, she's a Democrat. That doesn't mean she's lying. That doesn't mean she's making up this story out of a partisan vendetta. But when people start denying this, then we start, looking a little bit askance. It kind of suggests you're not playing straight with us if you're insisting that someone who has a clear political viewpoint doesn't really have a political viewpoint. And then on the other guy, the congressman, ripping into Susan Collins. I talked a little bit about death threats in the Jolt today as well. Look, I've gotten them, Greg. I don't know if you've gotten them. I'm willing to bet a good chunk of the people who are listeners have gotten them. If you are active in the public realm, whether it's politics, whether it's sports, whether it's pop culture, chances are some nut job is going to really get bothered by what you say, and they're going to find your email account, and they're going to say something. In my case, I believe it was somebody said something along the lines, I'm going to put a bullet in your brain, right? That's not fun. That's not enjoyable. Your blood runs cold at that moment. But what you do is the FBI on their website has a place to report threats. You forward it, and the best thing you can do is go on with your life. And my colleagues and I, we've all talked about this lots of times. Semi-reassuringly, I've been told, oh, don't worry. If somebody sets out to kill you because they're angry at what you've written, they're never going to bother emailing you beforehand. So great, I guess. That means 3 or 4 people I can rub off the list of possible people who want to show up and kill me one day. You can't let death threats alter what you're going to do with your life. You got to go out and live your life. It's a little bit like that post 9/11 argument. If you stop living your life, the terrorists win. If you stop doing things you want to do because some nut job living in his parents' basement decided to send a vicious, threatening note to you, they win because they've gotten you to stop doing what you want to do. By the way, that would be my advice to Ms. Ford and to everybody else, and to Ms. Senator Collins, everybody else. Yeah, I'm not saying this isn't scary. I'm not saying this isn't real. I'm not saying you shouldn't consult law enforcement, notify them. Take appropriate steps if you think it's necessary. If your address is out in public records, and you can take them down, maybe take yourself out of the phone book, stuff like that. Having said that, I don't see why this Congress would ever think it's a good, oh, boo-hoo, you're getting threats. Well, look, I don't, look, it's never good to get threats. I'm glad he took down the tweet. I'm glad he regretted it. I do think it kind of reflects a bit of the mentality going through Democrats' minds right now, where the threats against Ford are an easy explanation as to why she would not want to testify. But Susan Collins getting threats are no big deal. It's just not a good way to think about these things, Greg.
Jim, let's move to our crazy martini now. It's been pretty heavy so far here in the 3 Martini Lunch today, so let's have some fun, at least a little bit, in the crazy martini. This is WTOP. This is the major radio news station here in Washington. Vote or die, unless it's too hard to find a stamp. A Fairfax County focus group this summer found many college students who have gotten an absentee ballot simply fail to send it back because a U.S. Postal Service stamp seems to be a foreign concept to them. Quote, one thing that came up, which I had heard from my own kids, but I thought they were just nerdy, was that the students will go through the process of applying for a mail-in absentee ballot. They will fill out the ballot, and then they don't know where to get stamps, said Lisa Connors with the Fairfax County Office of Public Affairs. That seems to be a hump that they can't get across. The focus group included college interns from across numerous county departments. She said, quote, they all agreed that they knew lots of people who did not send in their ballots because it was too much of a hassle or they didn't know where to get a stamp. Now, Jim, we've had some ugly moments in terms of who ought to be eligible to vote in our past in terms of race and literacy and poll taxes and things such as that. Maybe there shouldn't be a threshold, but if there is, I think knowing how to find a stamp, how to function generally in life isn't asking too much.
The pride of Fairfax County. Nothing but the very best in my home county. Greg, out of curiosity, when was the last time you went to the post office?
I had to mail something a few weeks ago. I've been there, yeah.
Okay. I think for me, it's been a few months. We do electronic banking and bill paying and all that kind of stuff. You know what? We're going to do audio excitement for all of our listeners. I am looking in my drawer. Okay. I can't find stamps right now, but that's mostly a reflection of just how unbelievably messy my desk drawer is than the lack of existence of stamps. If I really needed to, I could find some. For the first question, I'd love to see a poll of this. Amongst the youth of Fairfax County, how many of you know where the post office is? Second question, can you think of a website that you could look on to find where your nearest post office is? Third, do you know how much a stamp costs? By the way, I wouldn't be giving them any grief about not getting this one right because they do raise it a couple of cents every year. In light of all that, this really shouldn't be that impossible. Although I kind of wonder, Greg, how long until people cite this argument to say, hey, this is why we need electronic voting over the internet.
Oh,
it's too hard to apply for an absentee ballot. I need to vote from my phone, man.
I don't know. All the libs love the paper trail now, so maybe we're moving away from that. But you're right. The convenience factor. They can get stamps by just tapping a few things on their phone, too, but I guess that's too hard.
That's right. You can print them out, right? Can't you print out postage?
Yes.
So this is not merely like post office illiteracy. This is all general functioning. How do I find things literacy? Greg, and I also want to point out, it does explain every time I've gone to the post office, there has been a line that is shameful, right? Absolutely. But now I'm recognizing I don't think I've ever seen a single young person in line. They all are people who date back to like the Mesozoic era, which may have been when the line started, considering how quickly it's moving. Actually, that's the difference between the post office and the DMV. You do see some young people at the DMV.
They have no choice.
Yeah.
What'd you do when you were young? What was your biggest challenge? Oh, I don't know. Great Depression, World War II. What's your biggest challenge? Finding a stamp.
The interesting thing, people will argue, beyond this, how many things do you actually get in the mail anymore? And my point would be Christmas cards, some stuff from Amazon, official mail, it's mostly junk mail. NR forwards the office mail from psychos every couple of weeks. Yeah, that's about it. So, that's the other question. The post office can never really go down because we require it for absentee ballots. So anyway, that's where we are. Hope for the future, America. Thank God it's Friday.
One more day. We'll see you then. Jim, have a good one.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Don't forget to check out our good friends over at Casper Mattresses. Casper.com/lunch. You get $50 off your next mattress. And join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.